What's good, YouTube? It's Jazz. Welcome back to my channel. It's been a minute since I made a video. Y'all know 2020 got a little hectic, but I am back to talk to you guys about how to begin your spiritual journey. So a little background about myself. I have always been a spiritual person. I grew up around crystals, learning about intuition and law of attraction, because those are all things that my mom was doing research on her own. So when she got the books for these things and she bought the crystals, I was always, right beside her, just learning and kind of like learning about these things before I was even ready to really indulge in them. A lot of times when I'm watching like a spiritual video or, reading a Twitter thread about spirituality, there's a lot of comments about people wondering where they should start with their spiritual journey, which is very valid because there's a lot of information out there on the internet and it might be hard to figure out where to start. There's crystals, tarot cards, angel numbers, life path numbers. It's just a lot of things that you can kind of get into, and it's kind of hard to figure out where to start. So I'm going to help you guys with that, with these couple of tips. Even if you're into different things, this should kind of be a general thing that should work for everybody. So first and foremost, I think that it's really important to identify any fears or doubts or reservations you have around spirituality, or a certain spiritual practice that you were interested in doing but you were just too afraid to get into. So identify what's been holding you back from starting your spiritual journey, because through identifying what's been holding you back, you can kind of start your research there to ease your anxieties about it. So for example, I always felt called to do tarot readings, to work with tarot cards, but I was always afraid of, what people usually say, like, that stuff is like demonic, or, I was just afraid of inviting anything bad into my, energy or to my spirit. I didn't want to attract anything negative. I didn't want any of that on my spirit. So I was just like, I'm gonna just stay away from that. That's nothing I need to be concerned with. But as soon as I started doing my own research, talking to people who do tarot cards, tarot readings, I was really like, oh, it's really not as insidious as I thought. It's really not insidious at all, unless, that's what you want to use it for. Which is the case with anything. People can use things for good or for bad, so it's really just how you want to use things, because you won't even get the full effects of what the work that you're doing if you're afraid of what you're doing. So my next suggestion is going to be write it down. Write everything down. Write it down. Write it down. I am such an advocate for journaling. I have been journaling since I was a kid. It's just a really good tool for self-reflection, which is like a really big part of a spiritual journey. You have to do the inner work before you can do anything else, and if you aren't doing self-reflection, then you're not doing your spiritual journey correctly. Right now, this is my spiritual journal. I put anything in here literally that has to do with my spirituality, when it comes to tarot cards, moon phases, spirit guides, anything, symbols that I see all the time. I just write it down, and it's really good, especially if you date it and put the time on it. To go back and read this stuff to see your growth is really helpful. Moving right along, my next suggestion is to research and know your lane. Please do some research and please know your lane. And I'm gonna just be blatant and come out and say it so that there's no blurred lines. Know yourself, know your heritage, and just acknowledge that just because you think something is cool, it doesn't mean it's for you. You can appreciate somebody doing something without having to copy that same thing. And do some research. When people are telling you not to do something and they're in a spiritual, further along in their spiritual journey than you should probably listen. And I'm gonna give y'all this example, which you probably know if you have a Twitter, but this white girl who identified as a Wiccan wanted to put a hex on her ex-girlfriend, who is a black woman, using voodoo. It's not clicking. And if you don't know why this is bad, just do some research on, how voodoo, hoodoo came to exist, why it's there, who it's for, who was created by, who usually practices these things, which is why I'm saying know your heritage and know your lane. Not everything is for you. She ended up dabbling in something that was not for her. She got warned by other people in the spiritual community. They told her, listen, this is not your lane. You should not be using voodoo, let alone to hex somebody who's black. But they already told her. She didn't listen, and she's dead now. So If that's not an indicator of know yourself, know your lane, do some research, please. I don't know what else I can tell you to, you know, make that point clear. Also, another word on research, the internet is a great source of information. Sometimes YouTube is really helpful because seeing somebody physically tell you something is kind of more helpful, but nothing beats books, y'all. And I know like some people don't like to read, but really this is the time to read. There are books for everything. If you have a certain interest, find a book for it and read that junk, because usually it's just better to have a physical, you know, something that you can reference, you can go back, you can highlight everything. So you guys, I've always been interested in crystals. Like I said, I grew up around crystals, and this is one book that I've seen since I was a kid. My mom had this, the Crystal Bible. I went and I got my own. As soon as I moved out, I have my own crystals. Whenever I get a new crystal, I just open this joint up and just research it. So if I want to know something about calcite, it's so much information about calcite, pages and pages. Also, with having information about crystals, I want to know how to properly use them. So I bought another book about crystals and how to use them, if it will focus on it. Crystal healing. I want to know everything there is to know about how I can utilize the tools that I have the best way that I can. And the best way to do that is to get me a book that I can always have and I can always reference this. So building on heritage, next suggestion is Ancestor Work. This is a great place to start, because this is going to the root of who you are, where you come from. You know, these are people who love you, who cherish you, who will probably be helping you already. You just probably didn't know that. This is a great place to start. I don't know if everybody's seen the movie Coco, but that movie was a really good representation of why, you know, showing appreciation to your ancestors, remembering them, telling stories about them, appreciating them are really important. All those things were true. That's kind of like a preview into Ancestor Work. You know, Coco was actually like top tier, especially if you're somebody who knows your ancestors, has pictures of them, or know of the people who came before you. That is a big privilege, like, to know who your ancestors are. If you are somebody who's not familiar with your ancestors, I don't really know all of my ancestors, don't worry, you can still do the work. So the full statement that I use to kind of cover all bases with what I just said is ancestors of blood and spirit, known or unknown, of good character, and who have good intentions and love me. That feels like it covers everything for me. That's a good statement. Since we're on the topic of ancestor work, let me just give y'all just quick tips of what not to do, just in case you don't go beyond this video for any of your research. Do not call upon ancestors who have died tragically. That's just a no-no. If you want more information in that, you can research that on your own. Also, if you have a relative or anybody who has just recently died, do not just immediately call on them. Give them some time so they can get acclimated and transition into the spiritual realm. Give them some time. So 6 months to a year, probably maybe a year if you just want to be sure. Also, when you're doing ancestor work, do not have living people on your altar. You can have a picture of your ancestor, but do not put a picture that has a living person in it on your altar. Cut that person out. You do not want a living person on your ancestor altar. Make it make sense, okay? That, even without me going in depth, that should all make some type of, you know, general sense to you guys of why that should be like something that you shouldn't do. But okay, that's all I have for you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.